Hi, I'm Carl with DVL. We're going to continue our adventure learning how to photograph the perfect bait. In today's video, we're going to talk about the subject of the photograph and how to make sure the subject stays the subject. Please like and subscribe and come along and join me on this wild ride. There's many ways to photograph your subject, your soft plastic bait or that jig, whatever it is that you're trying to take a picture of and sell. But what it boils down to is there's a right way and a wrong way. My bet is up until now, many of you have just picked the bait up in your hand, laid your baits on top of there, and then taking your phone and taking a picture, and that's what you post online. When you do that though, what exactly is the subject? Is the subject the bait's in your hand, or is the subject the fact that your hand can hold the baits? The brain gets confused when it looks at that picture and it doesn't know what it's buying. It might think it's buying the baits, but subconsciously it says, oh, those baits come with a hand, you don't want that. And so then they swipe left or swipe right or whatever the swipey thing is that they do, and they move on to the next one, and you don't have a chance. What we want to do is take a photograph like this one. In this photograph, you can clearly see what the subject is. What is the subject in this photo? If you notice, everything in this photo, except for the background, is in focus. Sharp, clear focus. That becomes the subject. So this photo is not only a photo of the baits that I want to sell, but more the molds. I want to sell the molds that make that bait. Okay? Therefore, a sample of the baits on the subject is fantastic with the subject as part of the midground. Okay? In every photograph, you have three layers: the foreground, the midground, and the background. Generally, your subject has to be in the midground or the foreground, one of those two areas. If it's anywhere else in that photograph, then it's not the subject, because things in the background just become clutter. We're going to talk more about backgrounds, what to use and what not to use, in a video that's coming up in the short future. For now, let's focus. Let's get back on subject of our bait. Do we want to sell one bait? Do we want to sell 100 baits? What exactly is it that we are selling? Let's take a look at some samples. In our first sample here, we see we have some baits. They're pretty nice baits, but they're not our subject because they're not laid right. They look strange, don't they? Laying them on their side would help a lot. Now they're closer to being our subject. And this is what we want as our subject. Some nice looking baits. Okay? These two over here, they look different simply because of the way the mold is. The mold pours these with a flat top. I intentionally poured these with a darker bottom so that I could confuse you. Okay? When you have baits like this, they just don't look quite right. And nothing will help them. So you're better off choosing a different bait. So when we choose our next bait, what exactly is it that we want to choose? We could try to lay our baits out in a line, kind of like these worms. They're just stretched out and they're just laying there. They can be the subject, but they're going to need some help. Other things we can do is elevate our baits. Okay, we don't want to hold them like this. We want them elevated so that they stand by themselves. Something like that would look like this. Now these baits look better. They're more of our subject because they look right. They look like they're in their natural environment. They look the way you would want to present them to a fish. This bait has absolute potential of becoming a great photograph. This is another one you see quite often. Bait makers will lay all of their baits out on a tray while they're curing, and that's the photograph that they want to take and try to sell their baits. It may work for you, but what's the actual subject? The bait or the tray that holds the bait? So if you're selling cookie sheets, this would be an alright photograph. If you're selling baits, we may want to consider a different look. Sometimes making a subject is as easy as zooming in and showing only the subject. Now, it doesn't really matter that those baits are laying on a cookie sheet because you can't tell it's a cookie sheet. You're looking at baits. That's what you're trying to sell, is baits. So, think three-dimensionally. Even though the camera will only photograph in 2 dimensions. In other words, it flattens your subject out. We need to think three-dimensionally about that subject. That subject has length, width, and depth. In future videos, we're going to show you how to use lighting to ensure that all 3 dimensions on these baits are positively portrayed. So, set yourself up for that future video by choosing a bait and looking at it 3-dimensionally. Other things to think about when choosing your subject is color. These ultra clear worms look really nice and they catch a lot of fish. However, they're very difficult to photograph. There are ways we can do it, and in a future video I'm going to show you those tricks. Keep in mind that the less opaque your subject is, the more the background will wash it away. So, even though you can photograph them, do you really want to? Would it be better to photograph a black worm and then tell them you have also available clear with silver sparkle? Another aspect you want to consider when you're picking your subject is the reflectivity of it. Does it reflect light back at you like this mold does? These are very clean, very shiny molds, and they just blow light everywhere. So, even though you can photograph them and make them look good, you also need to consider what are you going to see in the reflection. If you can see the photographer holding a camera in that reflection, that probably would not be a very good photograph unless you're trying to portray that these are very clean, shiny molds and have a great reflection. So now that we know what our subject is and how to pick out that subject, things to look for in that subject that might affect our photography, let's go on and look at the equipment we need to help us take a better photo. Remember the most important aspect of the subject of the photograph. Pick the subject, know the subject, and keep the subject the subject. Focus on the subject. We don't want to worry right now about complicated backgrounds, about complicated equipment. We want to know our subject. What is our subject? Let's focus on that. In the next video, we'll look at some basic equipment. Some equipment you may already have at home. Hey, thanks for joining me today. This has been a great adventure, and it's only going to get more fun as we go. Until the next time I see you, please like and subscribe. And remember, if it looks good, you'll throw it in a can, smear it with mustard, and you'd eat it too. I'm Carl with DVL. Thanks for coming along with me.